Hello everybody, thank you for watching on YouTube. Daily Motion, support.com. We had a great super chat this past weekend and we started using Streamlab as a way to support the show without using Google, because Google takes a big chunk of the money when you do that. And now, so I get the whole amount and you're not giving any money to Google, who likes censoring progressive media such as myself. You're watching The Political Vigilante. We are all making Gotham great again. Look at it. Boom. My shoulder's in the way a little bit. We're going to duck down. Look at that. Come back up. So this article was by Naomi Klein in the Intercept. There's nothing natural about Puerto Rico's disaster. It's an excellent article. It is in the show notes below. And what she goes into here is how there's been a long history, not just in Puerto Rico, but of the powerful, whenever there's a natural disaster in a less powerful or third world or poorer country, they swoop in and use it as a land grab. So long before Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico was a textbook example. Before the fierce winds came, the debt, illegitimate and much of it illegal, was the excuse used to ram through a brutal program of economic suffering, what the great Argentine author Rodolfo Walsh, writing about decades earlier, famously called planned misery. Yeah, planned misery. And so it's pretty staggering. It's not just the complete dropping of the ball. It looks like from a distance that it's just a complete abandonment or dropping of the ball of Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, which that has happened, but it's far more nefarious. It was like set up, like they put this whole system in place so that when a natural disaster does hit, and they know one will happen, we can swoop in, right? So it wasn't just the act of God that caused all this awfulness. It's the infrastructure of corruption, or as this is called, planned misery. It was a plan. So what happened is I'll say this before you get they put a plan in front of the Puerto Rican government. Oh, we're going to do this and privatize stuff and all this awful stuff. And people were like, no, this is an awful plan. The plan was so widely rejected that no elected representative could be trusted to carry it out, which is why in 2016, the United States Congress passed the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act, known as PROMESA. That law amounted to a financial coup d'etat that put Puerto Rico's economy directly in the hands of the unelected Financial Oversight and Management Board. In Puerto Rico, they called it La Junta. And then the wording of this, the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act. So in that is then used by like politicians and a lot of conservative politicians. See, there's this hint of like, those goddamn Puerto Ricans can't manage their money, so we got to come in and save them. That's what the undercurrent, the racist undertone of that is, right? Mexico's having all this financial trouble. Why do we got to come bail them out? The Mexicans can't, right? It was always that thing, right? Those Mexican drug dealers, who are they selling the drugs to? Oh, Americans. Right. Got it. Not the people of Puerto Rico, but all those systems that had already been deliberately brought to the brink. Power, health, water, communication, food, all those systems collapsed. And let us be clear, it was that combination of disaster capitalism and extraordinary hurricane that stole so many people's precious lives. A few lives were lost to wind and water, yes, but the vast majority died because when you systematically starve and neglect the very bones of a society, rendering it dysfunctional on a good day, such a society has absolutely no capacity to weather a true crisis. I talk about this a lot. When you have oligarchs and a kleptocracy eroding everything. I've said this before, I've been a disaster volunteer for the American Red Cross, and when there's a disaster, you have all this infrastructure in place. FEMA, the American Red Cross, the police and fire departments, the local, they all start working together, right? And when you start eroding that, right? You have to get the electric company involved. You got to get the phones. You got to get all this stuff in place, the roads, everything when there's a big natural disaster. And you have to coordinate all of these local, state, and federal agencies. It's a massive logistical undertaking on top of the fact that there's floods, there's fires, whatever the natural disaster is. So when this is all done ahead of time, power, health, water, communication, food, all these systems, you make them on the brink of collapse when conditions are good, and then a big hurricane hits, it's awful. And this article, Naomi Klein has been researching this disaster capitalism that is referenced here. She said she's been researching it for 20 years. The article is very in-depth. I'd go into it. And I've done stories on her work at the Intercept before. This is what the research tells us. Those studies Donald Trump so casually denies. The major causes of death were people being unable to plug in medical equipment because the electricity grid was down for months. It's not that big of an island. How long was the electricity down in Houston or Florida or any of the Gulf states whenever a hurricane hits? And they're bad. North Carolina just now. If the electricity was down for months in Texas, people would lose their shit. Months. And that's the thing. It's not just food supply. It's medicine. It's dialysis machines. It's all kinds of stuff. Health networks so diminished, they were unable to provide medicine for treatable diseases. People died because they were left to drink contaminated water because of a legacy of environmental racism. We don't care about the brown people. Why should they have clean water? They got clean water in the Hamptons. They got clean water in the Hamptons. Believe me, yeah. Beverly Hills has got clean water. Yep. Every rich neighborhood's got clean water. Trust me. Trust me on that one. People died because they were abandoned and left without hope for so long that suicide seemed the only option. Because for 500 uninterrupted years, the role of Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans in the world economy has been to make other people rich, whether by extracting cheap labor or cheap resources or being a captive market for imported food and fuel. A colonial economy, by definition, is a dependent economy, a centralized, lopsided, and distorted economy, and as we have seen, an intensely vulnerable economy. It's awful. But where else have they done this? This disaster capitalism. Here's an article. January 5th, 2006. That's about 4 months after Katrina. Katrina hit September of 2005. Biggest, boldest urban land grab in history. I was in New Orleans working at a comedy club a year later, September of 2006. A year later. And you know what? I saw all these abandoned homes. They weren't being rebuilt. People weren't being put back in there. They were stuck in FEMA trailers because it was a land grab, man. It was a land grab. The poor neighborhoods, oh, those got flooded first. Weird. Those neighborhoods did not get fixed up. Biggest, boldest urban land grab in history. 2006. That's disaster capitalism. So it's more examples of don't believe what they're telling you. Don't believe what they're telling you. And Puerto Rico is part of the United States. Again, the richest country in the history of the world. But we gutted that country before the hurricane ever even hit. And then after it hit, sorry. Trump goes down there, hands out some food, gets some good photo ops. Nice. But really, really awful. But they've been doing this for a long time. They've been doing this for a long time. Thanks for watching the show, you guys. Please support on the Patreon. Tour dates at grahamelwood.com. All of that stuff is below. Thank you so much. You are all making Gotham great again.